Well, good morning from Cottage Farmstead. If we haven't met before, I'm Rebecca. And today I'm taking advantage of the fact that it's overcast and cloudy, and even though it's humid, it's not super toasty outside just yet, to give you a tour of our August garden here at the Cottage Farmstead. As you can see behind me here, the field is yellowing still compared to our garden. We have been irrigating our garden. So we did have a week of cooler weather with some rain mid-July, which was great to have a break from the intense heat and the drought. But for the last couple weeks, we have not had any rain, even though it's very cloudy out here today. We're getting rain all around us. Our little plot of land is continuing to remain very dry. The field is getting dry and crispy again, and we're having to run the irrigation in our vegetable garden as well. So the berry harvest in our first terrace along here has wrapped up. We were able to put up about 1.5 quarts of blueberries, which is not bad for their second year. And then the raspberries that are over to my left look like we're going to get a little bit of a fall harvest. But we do have a pretty good sized hornet nest that's forming in the shrubbery. We haven't been able to eradicate it totally yet, so mostly keeping our distance until we can get rid of that hornet nest. So stepping down into the urban flower terrace, you can see that we still have black-eyed Susans coming in. They self-sowed, so they kind of naturally had their own succession planting. But you can also see that we do have a lot of dead growth from our first bloom of black-eyed Susans, and that's a general theme of the urban flower terrace right now. The oregano has flowered and it's starting to die back and get woody, but underneath you can see down there we've got new growth coming, so we need to trim back the tops so that we can start having the new growth come out. Same thing with our daisies. I don't think they were in blooming last month's video, but they definitely have died back, but there is some new growth coming at the bottom, so we need to chop and get the dead growth out. Our dahlias actually made a surprise comeback, which has been kind of neat. This one hadn't bloomed in about a month or so, and then these ones over here last month were getting eaten alive by something, but they are doing fantastic again. In some instances, they're still getting nibbled on. I think at this point it's just grasshoppers. It's not whatever was eating the entire petal, but they're still really pretty in flower arrangements. This is a beautiful contrasting flower for our zinnias, which did finally start flowering. We had some surprise salvia sage pop up along here. We had a few plants that I relocated to our back garden around our porch, but these guys got missed or they self-seeded themselves. So I'll probably be relocating these maybe to our driveway entrance because they have been very deer resistant, and that's our main issue with trying to grow flowers anywhere but in our protected garden. Our alyssum actually filled in around the rocks like I was hoping it would, so it is looking beautiful. I might be planting some more alyssum next year because I really do like the look of how it spills out into our pathway there. Yarrow, definitely gone, but the celosia took off. Look at all of those beautiful colors. A lot of this was self-sown, but there was a few that I planted in there. It looks like this year the dark fuchsia pink took over the genetics. I was hoping to start cultivating more of the golden color because I like the gold coral color in my flower arrangements. But I will not complain, as it's been beautiful to have some variety in the bouquet arrangements that I sell and enjoy in our house. You see behind me here the grapes filled out on their trellis. And this particular vine has finished fruiting. I think there's a handful of grapes, maybe like 5 or 6 that are still left on the vine. And they've been so good. Every time I harvest a cluster, I usually eat the entire thing in one sitting. And then this one over here is a younger vine. It did produce a little bit of fruit. I think there's one more cluster left on this one. Come winter, we'll be pruning these back, but we're very excited to see how well they did the second year that we had them here. And we're hoping maybe next year they'll make it all the way over the trellis. So apologies for all the hammering that you hear in the background. My parents are actually building their house next door to us right now, and they are working on the roof, which is probably a good thing since it's raining all around us and they're calling for more rain later this week. So looking down the middle of our urban flower terrace here, you can see these snapdragons came back yet again. They keep getting scraggly, and I'm thinking about pulling them out, and then they bloom again. I may end up relocating these somewhere else so that I can use this bed for a different flower next year. But surprisingly, these plants have continued to keep coming back. I planted them last spring, so spring 2023, and they're still blooming. So I may relocate them to the driveway or somewhere out back so that I can try growing something different here next year. The middle part of the terrace here has been mostly taken over by the alyssum. There was a petunia in here that was blooming, and then there's a couple calendula, a couple strawflower have bloomed. And it looks like the echinacea is not going to bloom for me this year, but I'm going to have plenty of it next year in this patch. So in our last few garden tours, I've talked about how the zinnias just weren't thriving. I wasn't sure if I was going to get any blooms, and look at this. That week of slightly cooler weather with some rain, and they took off. I've been getting a lot of beautiful flowers. They're not very big this year. They are a little stunted. But I am able to enjoy some of my favorites, which are the Queen Lime series. And I've had some of the lemon ones, the blush ones, and I think a couple of the orange ones bloom in here. I cut some of them yesterday for a bouquet, so there's not a whole lot out here today. But I am so excited that they did eventually take off, so I can enjoy them this year too. So earlier in the summer, we had the Japanese beetle massacre that took out most of our roses. They left the foliage just enough intact that the plants were able to revive themselves and give us a second bloom. So we've been enjoying these Lady of Chalet orange roses out here on the plant. And over here, I don't know if they survived the wind that we had the other day. Doesn't look like it. They dropped their petals, but some of these white roses were blooming a couple days ago, which was very beautiful. And this gaillardia has been a rock star in our garden all summer. It has bloomed like this despite the intense heat, despite growing in pretty much straight clay, and it has been thriving. You see it's been filling out. It works decently as a cut flower. Even the little puffy balls of the seeds have been looking fun in bouquets. So I'm definitely going to continue growing this. I have a feeling it's heavily self-sowed itself in this area, so I'm not going to save too many seeds, but I look forward to growing this in future years as it's been beautiful, especially when a lot of other things stopped blooming during the intense heat. And then along here, we mostly just have surprise volunteer row. Had a whole bunch of echinacea pop up in the middle of the summer, as well as a feverfew plant randomly. More of the gaillardia that I'm going to let continue growing there. Another echinacea. And holy basil. I don't even think we planted holy basil last year, so I'm not sure where this seed came from. But that popped up, and we have another one that's growing in the middle of the sweet potato patch over there. This dahlia came back. I've cut most of the flowers off this week to continue letting it bloom some more. But this patch here, oh, we have another volunteer sunflower over there. So this has mostly just been volunteers taking over and filling in for me, which has been very convenient because it's been way too hot to be out here working in the garden. So let's step down into our vegetable terrace. Some of the crops that I've reported throughout the summer that weren't doing the best have managed to produce some fruit. But we do have a lot of stunted varieties and things that took a break when we had the intense heat. So let's take a look. So our two pepper rows here remain stunted, but the blot pepper variety of sweet pepper actually had a second flush of blossoms when we had that cool down in late July. So we're going to get a second crop off of them, which is going to be great. And then the jalapenos, although they didn't live up to their name of grande size, they did produce enough for me to put up some cowboy candy and do some preservation of the jalapenos. The other ones, the Carolina Red, have produced a few bell peppers for us. They've been susceptible to a lot of blight. It's not the best producer this year. And then our Tuda orange pepper, I think I've gotten one the entire summer. So not our best pepper year. We are definitely going to plant the blot pepper again next year. And give the grande jalapenos one more try. Maybe work on our fertility a little bit over the winter to see if we can get a better pepper harvest next year. Behind me here you can see our very happy carrot bed, and it is time for us to start pulling them out as it is actually starting to flower on a few of them. We don't want them to get bitter like they did last year, so probably later this week we're going to be pulling out this carrot bed and seeing what kind of yield we got. The next to it here we have our pumpkin on a stick. It has set so many blossoms. There's a few little orange fruit on there. So I'm looking forward to seeing if it lives up to being a great cut flower arrangement for the fall. I think it'd be really cute, especially if I could dry it and have it sitting in a vase somewhere. So we're gonna see how they turn out. Behind it is our basil. We've been continuing to harvest off of it. I've preserved as much as we need, so we've started selling it locally. And then behind them is our very stunted row of okra. But it has started producing, and I have been putting up steadily, probably about a quart bag a week. So it's not a lot, but you don't need a lot of okra. It's actually kind of nice to not have the okra coming in so fast that you can't keep up with it. And intermixed underneath it, the chard continued producing, so we've been eating it, we've been selling it. The kale has died off, and the lettuce has bolted and died off down here as well. So we're mostly just getting a little bit of okra each week and a couple bunches of chard. And back over to the side where the peppers were, we have the empty row where the summer squash was. And you can see that our cucumbers are just about finished. We have a few down here that we're saving for seed. We're getting a couple of cucumbers off of it a week, but I mean, they're really tiny. So we're planning on having this pulled out this week to open up another bed for the fall garden. So this year, since we are anticipating our first child, we are not planning on managing the majority of our garden this winter. We were originally planning on letting it go fallow for the winter. But Growing Green Family Farms was like, hey, if we bring in some compost and seed, can we grow some of our greens and root crops in your garden space and manage it on the Growing Green time? Especially since we have a deer fence around this garden, as some of their gardens have been getting hit by deer pretty heavily lately. So they're going to take over management of our garden for the next couple of months until we get to planting our onions and garlic and stuff come November and December. So that'll be a huge blessing to not have everything just lying fallow and growing weeds, is that it'll be actively managed while we bond with our new baby. So this very thick jungle behind me of 3 rows here that's pretty much almost grown together are our tomatoes. They produced super well for us. We put up all of our tomato products that we needed. We've also been selling them to family so that they can put up some of their own tomatoes since they were able to grow their own this year. We're gonna let this continue producing probably until frost, or that it starts getting some sort of blight before we pull it out. But at this point, it's pretty much almost grown all the way together. Because we had such intense heat and the drought, we weren't able to prune like we normally would with tomatoes because we didn't want to dehydrate our tomato plants and put them under heat stress. So that's why we ended up with such a crazy jungle this year. Thankfully, with the drought though, we're not having as many blight issues because there wasn't as much moisture problems. So on this other side, our asparagus is quite tall, taller than me, as you can see here. And the strawberries that we planted this spring down below have put out a ton of runners. So we're hoping later this fall to move some of these runners to another plot where we can continue growing more strawberries for ourselves. The strawberries that we did get from these plants this year were so good that we're excited to have 2 rows of them next spring. So our Provider green bean row here stopped production when it got really hot on us. But when we did have that cool down, it set a whole bunch more blossoms and it put out more beans. And so we were able to put up all the beans that we needed for the year, which was perfect timing as the plants are dying off on us. It is towards the end of their life cycle. We are letting a few of the plants here up at the edge of the garden go to seed for us. So we have not been harvesting beans off of that. So we're hoping with saving more seed off this plant, especially after it survived the intense heat, even if it didn't set blossoms, that maybe next year it'd be even more heat tolerant for us. So behind me here is our butterfly pea row, and you can see I've already come through here and harvested all the flowers that popped up today. We've been getting about 200 to 400 flowers a day from this row here and been selling them to local chefs and restaurants and individuals at the farmers market. But these flowers are very fragile. If they get wet, they won't keep well, and if it gets too hot, they wilt on you. So we harvest them first thing every morning so that we are able to have them at maximum freshness to sell. And here at my... Excuse you? Yeah, you? Goose Goose keeps trying to talk to me every time I try to turn the camera on now that I'm close by. Yeah? Yeah? Uh-huh. So down at my feet here are our cantaloupe and watermelons, and we have been loving them for the past month. We were having some issues with rodents in our cantaloupes, but we caught 5 or 6 of them in a trap and been able to enjoy the fruit off of them. Maybe I should say Nathan's been enjoying the cantaloupe. Cantaloupe and I don't agree very well. But further down we have our watermelons, and Nathan and I have been eating our equal share of those. They are so sweet. I probably shared before that it's a mystery watermelon variety. We're not entirely sure what the parent variety was, but we've been seed saving for 3 or 4 years now and continuing to grow it. It is super sweet. It is a bit seedy, but it's so worth it. We have some more coming on the vine right now, and I will walk over and get a couple shots of that to show you how big some of these have been getting. Continuing the theme of things that we need to pull out, this tomatillo row, like I mentioned last month, full of bugs. Never got a single good tomatillo off of it, so this is going to be getting pulled out, and Growing Green will be planting here for the fall so that we don't have to manage this area. So the last section for the garden tour today is the 4 zones of our crop garden. You can see the silage tarp is still where we left it. We're on the potatoes as of last month. And then you can see that we have taken out the popcorn. The popcorn has started drying on the stalk, so we started harvesting it, but unfortunately it didn't get great pollination. The ear sizes were pretty small, and we had a ton of weevils. I have some B-roll of us harvesting the popcorn that I'll insert here, but our popcorn harvest was kind of a flop this year. We did have some fertility issues. We did have some washout of our compost. So we are going to try again next year, but we might not save even some of the seed that we had this year. We were originally planning on growing mostly of our seed for next year with this corn, but since they had so many issues and they were small, we're not going to try and raise genetic mutants next year, so we'll just buy some new seed. And this big patch of grass you see right here is where we had a lot of our winter squash, and it indeed all died on us. All of it died. We think the vine borers got a lot of it, which is very odd for winter squash. Did have a little bit of blight. We had one plant of pumpkin over there that was really trying to come back, but it got choked out by the grass very quickly when we had those cooler rains last month, and the grass just took over and choked it out. The sweet potato vines you can see back there, we're doing really well. And then last week, deer got into our garden. We had a small opening here that they discovered, and they got in and very, very quickly just chomped so much of this down. Don't think they ate enough to kill it off, thankfully, and we have put up an electric net in addition to our deer fence to keep them out of our garden. So hopefully we will have a good sweet potato harvest, even if our winter squash did not do well this year. Well, thank you for joining me for a tour of our August garden. As you saw, a lot of stuff is in transition. We're going to be pulling a lot of stuff out in the next week or so, and we're going to be turning management over to Growing Green Family Farms for the remainder of the fall. So this is probably going to be our last garden tour of the year, especially in light of a baby being on the way in the next couple of weeks. So we will wrap up the gardening season here for you all. If you'd like to see the previous garden tours this year, I'll link those above and below. And I'll also link down below to previous year's garden tours so you can see how this garden and our previous gardens have produced over the years. With that, I'll catch you next time.